Amen. Good afternoon. Well, good afternoon and good evening, depending on where you are in the country, but we're glad to have you along with us for another iteration of the conversation. And tonight we're going to go into part two of our conversation from last week about being exhausted, overwhelmed from all this COVID-19 talk and our election frustration. And today we're going to focus in on the political side of our conversation and the election frustration. Going to have a word of prayer, then introduce our panelists once again, and then get right into the conversation so that we have a lot of time to cover the topic and to get into the subject. So thank you for joining us. Bow your heads with me now as we have a word of prayer. Father in heaven, we just ask that your goodness and mercy would be with us throughout these moments that we have gathered here to have this conversation. I pray, Lord, that spiritually that we can find some healing and some decompression from all these things that we have been hearing and dealing with and involved with here in these past few weeks and months, especially concerning the election in our local area and, of course, nationally with the president. Lord, bless us now, we ask and pray in Jesus' name. Amen. Well, let's add our individuals to the screen who will be part of our conversation today. We praise God for each one of them and what they brought to us last week and what they are going to bring this week. Amen. And first, let me say welcome to each and every one of you. We have Dr. Cynthia Powell Hicks and Dr. Debbie Wright, and then Dr. Shanta Alexander, hopefully will be joining us soon, and Dr. Carrie Thomas, and we have Pastor Nigel Lewis, and hopefully we'll have Pastor or Dr. Lake joining us again today as well. But I want to say welcome to each and every one of you. I'm not going to go through formal introductions, sort of like we did last week, where we had each one of you say a few things about yourself. For those who are watching, if you want to know more about the individuals here, of course, you can go back to our conversation from last week and hear what they had to say about themselves. And of course, if you look their name up, I'm sure that you'll find some wonderful things online about them and the work that they do. And you can find them in so many other spheres of ministry and work in California and across the nation. For each one of them is very professional and have a lot that they have done and that they are involved in. Amen. And I
Amen.
have with me tonight another co-host. Pastor McBride is on vacation with his family for the Thanksgiving holiday, but I have my friend, my brother,
Yes,
Pastor and
sir.
Chaplain Carl Ricketts. Welcome to the conversation, sir. Yeah, he's been here plenty of times before. He's a face that many of you should be familiar with, but he will be my help on today. But we are glad to have each and every one of you. And we see Dr. Shanta Alexander has rejoined us. Thank you again. It is good to see you again this week here on the conversation. But let's get started and let's get right into it. And this is what I want to start with this study that has been done. A study by the University of Nebraska and Lincoln found that 1 in 5 Americans, did you hear that? 1 in 5 are sleepless or have had friendships damaged over politics. And I'm sure if I were to ask you to raise your hand, you could say, yeah, I've lost some friends due to our political beliefs and some of the discussions that we've had. I've had some challenging relationships because of political understandings and beliefs, but 1 in 5, that's quite a lot. So many of us after the election, we're dealing with stress, and as we heard last week, when just the mere mention of talking about the election caused some of us to tense up and to feel some kind of way about it. And I think that that's a common thing. So is there this thing called election stress disorder, and if so, how does it manifest itself? I'm gonna throw it out to you all. Help us decompress. Election stress disorder, how does it manifest itself, and how can we deal with it and kind of resolve it?
Well, I'll just say you're causing us stress by picking up this conversation. Right now, we already established that last week, right? And
Yes,
for the
yes.
viewers who are looking for me online right now, just ignore that one. That where I have the orange jumpsuit on. Just ignore that one. But but I want to say that it has been stressful, but not nearly as stressful as 4 years ago, right?
Mhm.
And so, to be honest, I haven't lost friends because over the Trump presidency, I think those who don't agree with me have either defriended me or they just didn't comment on my page. And so there has been a separation of sorts. And so I don't really experience any problems or any frustrations with my relationships. But in terms of the political scene and what's going on and the stress and the stimuli coming from TV and what I'm watching, that still exists. And of course, unlike most elections, many elections, we have a president who's still saying that he was elected. So it's crazy. It's really bizarre. But I choose not, as we talked about last week, I choose not to really immerse myself in that because I know that my mental health and self-care is uppermost here. And so that's kind of how I've related to this notion of, the stress in this political landscape.
I think for many people, there's more stress this time around with this most recent election than there was 4 years ago, because even though they may not have been in agreement or liked who was voted in 4 years ago, they might have said, well, let me just step back and wait and see, what happens. How is this going to play out? But, over the last 4 years, things definitely have gone in many different directions. And it's, the divisiveness, mean-spiritedness, the list goes on. And so people, especially this year, and with a pandemic on top of the election stress, it's created a whole new set of, anxiety and tensions and irritability. People are losing sleep. People are having more headaches and stomach aches and, other physical ailments, all related to this election. And it's an incredibly stressful time. And I know for me personally, I shared this with a few of you before we began. I had a former colleague who I followed on social media, and we would exchange pleasantries every now and again. And just 2 weeks ago, I made a decision to unfollow him just because of some things that he posted, because every time I would read it, it really disturbed my soul. And I just thought, one day I'd like to have a conversation with him about this, but I can't do this right now. And right after, probably an hour after our meeting last week, this conversation last week, I received a text from a former colleague. We all worked together years ago. And she said that he had died last Friday night from COVID. And I went through all different kinds of conversations and in my head that we had and just the emotion of it all. And, life is short. At the end of the day, we're not going to all see eye to eye. And so we have to figure out how to manage how we're feeling, what to do with it, and, how to move forward with this. Some people you just may choose not to talk to at the present time.
Yeah. But Debbie, did you say, I told you should have put on that mask? Did you feel that? Did you feel that though? I just want to be honest for one moment.
Well, I'm not going to say.
Well, I've lost more friends in church politics over the course of the last 3 years than I have with, the current politics that we've had. Obviously, I have never lost sleep over losing a friend. I've given them straight to the Lord because I am who I am, and I'm a child of God, and God leads me, and I try to put forth my best judgment and my best face at all times. And there's not a soul on the face of the earth that I wouldn't speak to, whether they like me or believe in my views, politically, in the church or out of the church. So I just tell other people to try as much as you can to separate if you want to still be friends. I have plenty of Republican friends, obviously, because of where I live, my neighbors and everything. And we all just say, they're going to use the best tools that God gives them to use. And it was frightening for me back in 2016. I asked the Lord every night, what were you thinking? Really? and the standing joke is when I interview people or I'm sitting on different committees and I'll say, well, what are their credentials? Or we'll talk about credentials. And I say, oh, wait a minute. I guess, in 2016, credentials weren't an issue. Anyway. So the bottom line is don't lose sleep. Let go, let God. And remember, as a child psychologist, I'll remind you, your kids are watching you and you setting the stage and the pace for what they're going to go out and tell other people. And if they use those veggie words, people are going to know, I know what goes on in that household.
You know, I might be the outlier here. I have not lost any friends. I don't see mean things on my social media page. And I don't know if you guys have seen the documentary, The Social Dilemma, and how it uses your algorithms, your personal habits to determine what you see on your page. So if you're really engaged in politics, if you keep clicking on that YouTube suggestion or that Facebook video, it's going to show you more of that. And I'm intentional about not clicking suggestions. I might go and search for the suggestion. I only learned this after The Social Dilemma, by the way. I might go and search for the suggestion, but I do not click on it because an algorithm has told me to look at it. And that really has narrowed what I'm fed with on my personal space. So you might want to try that.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's pretty good advice right there.
Check it out. It's on Netflix. I do not get any royalties from promoting it, but it's on Netflix. Social Dilemma.
No, I'm glad you brought up the algorithms. I'm glad you brought up the algorithms. There's actually this book, Algorithms of Oppression, and it just talks about how people use, these tech companies, they'll use the algorithms to put before you exactly what, they may want you to see.
Yeah. And it's interesting that that documentary was put together by people who developed Facebook and developed Google. And they tell you, we don't let our children let our children go through social media. And if the creators are saying that, then it means that you're pretty much giving them your entire life. And so you're going to see things that are going to make you angry, because we like punishment, right? We get angry and we're still searching out what is bringing up our blood pressure, So, yeah.
You're talking about my two key emotions there for the frustration, the anger and the fear. For me, the election frustration revolves around how angry you get with what seems to be so obvious to me and so not so obvious to somebody else who supports the other side. And I want to throw this out there. When a lot of times I analyze and I self-protect by deciding, well, you know what? This is where that person is coming from. I know we're going to be on a collision course. I really don't want to be there. But what when people are in your family, they haven't done the kind of reading and immersed in the kind of knowledge that you have. You don't want to come off as the know-it-all type, but it's right there in your family and it's in your space. You have to confront it.
You do.
You mean a staunch supporter of the president, who is the brother that you love, and you just can't seem to navigate around this conversation that must come up.
So I'm going to put out a disclaimer here. As an immigrant to this country, I do not have the type of experience that African Americans do. I've said I have not lost any friends because my friendships are such that they are willing to teach me as much as they can so that I can assimilate, right? Or just understand. So when you're thinking, when you say, when I hear you say, what about family members? I think the challenge that I've experienced is that everybody believes that they're right. And I'm intentional about watching Fox News so that I can understand a side that may not be the same as what I'm daily surrounded by. Right. And it's important to do that, to see things from another's perspective and allow people to feel heard. It might sound like garbage to us, but we sound like garbage to them. Right. So how about having healthy, authentic conversations? right? And particularly, you know, it's important to help people like myself who don't understand the history. So I remember very vividly, somebody taught me a very important lesson. In 2016, we had to have debriefings on campus. We had to have small groups and town halls because people were grieving. And you know what I saw it as? I saw it as America Unmasked. I did not know I was Black until I moved to America. No kidding. And I moved to Salem, West Virginia. If you know anything about Salem, West Virginia, I had no clue that I was Black, you know, and I had to learn these types of microaggressions, like, you're so beautiful for a Black girl. And I'm thinking, thanks. Don't know what that means. So it took me attending a potluck when there was this big conflict about AU It's Time. You all heard about it. And someone, I was trying to be the voice of reason and say, well, why couldn't we just talk about it? And someone said to me, are you African American? I said, no. Then sit down. That was the most valuable lesson. It may seem pretty rough, but I sat down and I understood that there is much that I do not know. And I think it is healthy to sit with individuals and explain, you know what, my great-great-grandmother remembers being a slave, right? Or my great-grandfather remembers these things. And to have these conversations, if it's in your family, hear people out, you know.
Yeah. But these conversations, I think that many of us, you know, we try to have these conversations and we get to a point where we don't want to have them anymore because we've had them with individuals. They may have gone the wrong way, or we leave there even more frustrated because people are speaking more to trying to get their point across than to listen and hear a point and learn from others. And so it can be a bit difficult, but I believe that you're right, that we should have these conversations, that we should talk, especially with family members. You know, Thanksgiving happened, right? And I also people posting online about getting together with families and having arguments with families as just part of the Thanksgiving tradition. But when I think are when these kind of things pop up more, when we're in big groups of family and we're outside of our house, you know, we have others there present that may not be in our household. And so they come from different parts of the country or the city or whatever and have different views on various things. And so we get into these conversations, but it's definitely healthy, I think, to have conversations. But, you know, I want to open this up to the rest of you as well. You know, what do we do in these instances, especially when it comes to politics, when we have had these conversations and we don't seem to get anywhere? You know, some of us have said, hey, people have deleted me. I may not have deleted others, but they have deleted me. Is it okay, healthy to delete others? Or should we continue to engage them when it comes to these, you know, political conversations, especially with others who don't see the same way that we do? You know, I watch Fox News sometimes, and I'm just like, are you serious that this is what they're saying? You know, are you serious? But, you know, should we delete individuals, move on from them? You know, kind of talk to us about that, because we're trying to decompress. So help us with this.
What I was going to say is, if we can think back to 2008, there were plenty of other folk, not our folk, so to speak, but there was a whole class of people that were grieving when Barack Obama was elected. So there were a lot of my neighbors that couldn't look me in the eye. I had even heard from some of the employees of that look like me, you know, African Americans that worked at General Conference, their non-African American counterparts, contemporaries, were having a difficult time looking them in the eye and admitting that we had an African American president. So I was very encouraged to hear that, you know, we're willing to learn other people's views. Not everyone is at that maturity level, and very encouraged that, you know, we're all children of God. We should not shun anybody. We can very easily, as was said last week, turn the channel. Don't open up someone's email. you know, but you know, it goes back to what would Jesus do?
Yeah. I would say that it just depends, right? So if I'm in a bad mood, I don't want to hear it. I don't want to have a conversation about it. And if I just had a conversation about it, I might be exhausted and don't want to talk about it. If I talked about it in a work environment, then I may not want to talk. So it just depends on what I've got the energy for, how soon it was that I just talked about it. So there are a lot of factors. If is this person so hardened in their position that I would be casting pearls before swines and wasting my time, in which case I don't. Now, to be honest, actually it was after Trump was elected, I made a conscious decision that I don't have time to spend in a lot of arguments about Trump and a whole lot of other things for that matter, because it's not at the end of the day really going to probably move the needle, but it will impair relationships, right? And so, so I just decided not to do that. And a funny thing just happened probably 3 weeks ago now. A friend of mine said, I posted something. They said, "Oh my goodness, I can't believe you." Now, was this Christian? And I really didn't understand the position that she was taking. So I was trying to probe a little bit more. So she was saying that I wasn't really Christian because of what I posted.
What?
I said, well, you know, I have always historically, ever since I've had a Facebook page, I have criticized every politician, even Barack Obama for that matter, and got a lot of hate mail, right? So I said, "So you haven't been watching," you know? She said, "Oh yeah, I have, but I only felt that it was important to speak out this time." I said, "Well, that's on you."
It's the one off.
That's right.
We have to hold people accountable, right? But then the other thing I didn't say last week is that there is a historian, Alan Lippman. So he has correctly predicted presidential races since 1984. I've been following him. And so he said Trump wasn't getting in. I'm good. I was fine. You know, he has what, 13 measures that he uses in each instance, and he's always as 13.
No, you're right.
13 categories. And so I follow him, and I was good. But I decided that no matter what happens, I'm gonna be good. Right. Mm-hmm. And but because I went into like almost a semi-depression last time, and I disconnected from social media I always do it fast at the beginning of the year, but I took my fast in November as opposed to January, and just really released because I needed some time to think, what is the Lord doing here? And so we just have to, you know, really be honest with ourselves, determine the amount of energy we have, the amount of investment we want to give, and how will it impact our relationships and friendships?
Yeah, what I was saying there is that what I was saying is Lippman has about 13 measures, and I think he says if 6 or 7 of them hit in an election year, you know, that president is probably going to be out. Well, he's predicted, like you said, he's hit all of them.
I'd like to know what those 7 were that hit this time that had him believe.
Economy was in one of them. Economy was.
Okay, we can talk about that later. Maybe that's another conversation. But I want to move this to our young people. You know, Cynthia, you said that our children are watching, and they watch our response to this and what we say about it, and they hear the conversations that we have with our friends and our families. You know, after 2016, many of us were saying, how can we tell people that character matters when the leader of the country, after everything that was said leading up to the election, everything that came out leading up to the election would have just damaged any other candidate, but it seemed to have no impact on him. I don't have to rehearse the things because we all know what they were. But then, you know, I was watching CNN this time around, and Van Jones began to speak when I think it had been called for Joe Biden. And he said it's now easier to tell your children that character matters. Wow. You know, and because of the decision that the country made for Joe Biden. And I believe that. I felt that in my soul. Van was crying, and I kind of felt that emotion, that it's a little easier now, that yes, this does matter.
Mm.
And the country has indeed said so. So let me ask this question. What is the impact of the current socio-political climate on our children? What is the impact from what you've watched in your own children? Most of us here have children. What have you watched in your own children? What have you learned about young people just through your studies, your interactions, and your work? But what is the socio-political impact on them during this time? And how best can we help them, aside from just being the proper example, but how can we guide them and lead them during times like this?
One of the things that seems to be quite noticeable to me, and I have young adult children who become engaged in the political process more this time than any other time before, is that they are not concerned too much about establishments, not political, not religious. They're concerned about what are the issues and how it affects them personally and the lives they have to lead within this climate. And so in terms of choosing a leader, for them, it's how does it benefit me? Does he see me? Does he know me? Do I get any mail from this person? And one of the things they always held up is the fact that Bernie Sanders seemed to connect with me because I get mail from him. He cares about my student loan. If he gets elected, these are the things that he's going to do, and he's talking to me. And Joe Biden was a hard sell for the young people where that was concerned, because for them, it must really impact their lives. Trying to tell them that this particular, a third party doesn't make it, you have to get with the one that is a big umbrella that's going down your street. They're not really concerned and interested in that. And I believe that this is a time when they're saying something. They're saying something in what was promoted is what's affecting my life and this new generation of voters. I also believe that there is a high level of confusion and doubtfulness in the sincerity of politicians because of what they have seen in terms of endorsing behaviors that are so totally contradictory to their moral standing and upbringing. I believe that over time, and I agree with, who was it? It was Dr. Ricketts who mentioned Van Jones a while ago, or that what connected with that is something that we have been grieving for a long time. The young people are seeing the political climate in a way that makes them want to distrust politicians, want to distance themselves from it. And I think the major reason why a lot came out is because they had a lot at stake that they could see a new government would be addressing. That's the perspective I see.
Mm-hmm. And I would say young people, and it depends on what age group we're talking about too, as to how it affects them and what they're thinking about it. But let's say young people who are teenage and older, I think they're able to see the contradictions and the hypocrisy. And I think it pains them. I think it grieves them, much like the hypocrisy that they see in the church. That grieves them, that pains them, that causes them to desire to disengage and not want to be part of the community and to grow in resentment, really. And so I think that young people, when they saw the shenanigans of Hillary Clinton and the DNC and how they treated Bernie Sanders last time around, they disengaged. And they didn't want to be part of the process, and they defected, and I think that hurt in some ways the campaign as well. So they vote. I think they vote with their feet. I think they vote with their dollars, and so they see the hypocrisy, because this generation is really compelled by transparency and integrity. That's important to them. It's not so much what's on the counter at your store, but what do you do with your profits? So who are you supporting? Are you supporting climate change, and so forth and so on? So this level of integrity and social responsibility goes further than our previous generation, certainly our generation, and they're looking at things from a very, very different lens perspective.
I think they also voted for the lesser of two evils. I see that. I think they're going to put this new administration's feet in the fire and accountability. I don't know about the integrity part, but I definitely know accountability. They put $1 down, they want to get $1 worth of whatever. I think that they are going to also be very guarded with trusting anything that is said, secondary to the last 4 years that we have experienced, as well as just within the last 10 months regarding the mismanagement of the pandemic. With COVID, we haven't mentioned the C word, but that's still the underlying, foundation of this year.
I'm listening and I'm hearing a like-mindedness amongst us, and I'm forced to sit with individuals who don't necessarily believe what I believe. And so I hear arguments very, very strongly about our Christian values and what is opening up with the laws that are changing that go directly against what we embrace as our moral compass, right? So there, we are in the middle. I think it was Dr. Cynthia that said it last week. We're in the middle of a war. And when children observe these things, I want to give you an example, slightly tangential, but I'm hoping you'll get it. I went to the spa before COVID, and I was getting my nails done. There was a 6-year-old who was the son of the owner. And I said, "What's your name?" I'm just going to give him a name, John. I said, "Joe?" He says, "John." And he spells it out, John. It's not your fault. You're Black. You don't know how to read.
Ooh.
Wow.
He's 6 years old.
Wow.
He is 6
We know where
years
he got that
old.
from.
And he had just turned 6 because they were celebrating his birthday. Mm-hmm. Right. And you ask, where did that child learn this? Mm-hmm. Well, where are people learning to talk over each other, right? Do you notice that the culture, common courtesy has changed to people talking over each other? Where do kids learn? You don't go over to this side of town because, where do kids learn these things? They only learn these things because they are watching us. Yeah. They are watching the society, the communities that we build for them, right? So when you ask, how does this impact our children? It doesn't just impact the children of today. We have a responsibility for the generation behind us.
Yes.
Right. Doctor, I'm glad you brought that up, because I think we need to understand the influences of the generations of today are impacting the generations of tomorrow. And on both sides, whether you're Republican, Democrat, even independents in between. I found it interesting that I was in a store and I was talking to a young Black male, and I'll identify myself, first generation American. Parents are those who did not know as well that they were classified as Black until they moved to this country, because that was all they knew in their country. So that for those in the chat, just let y'all know that what the doctor said, it does have validity. But what I noticed when I talked with this young man in the store, he said, "I got a check from President Trump. He gave me a check. He wrote his name on a check. I'm voting for him because no president has ever given me a check." And I think what we have to really get down to our kids is to understand the full picture, the big picture of what's really happening in society. It's the reason why I don't get upset in the conversations with my Republican friends, because I know, just being honest, they have not seen the whole picture, or they're not aware of the whole picture. So I take it upon myself. Let me let you know the part of the picture where I see that there's a gap in your understanding. And I think we all have a responsibility on that. And Jenks, take it from there, man. I just had to get that in. It's happening on both sides.
Well, let me just
Definitely.
add real quick. Next time you see that little guy in the store, I have plenty of things to say about the manicurist, little 6-year-old, but I can't say it online.
We move on.
Yes.
Yes, we move
You
on.
tell your little guy that thinks that check he's going to end up giving part of that money back, because Trump didn't take it out of his account. He took it out of our account. So our taxes are going to be raised. So he needs to really understand politics.
Exactly.
That's a perfect segue into this next question. People, it's one thing to be loyal to your party. It's one thing to be loyal to certain beliefs and align yourself with a party that seems to embrace the beliefs that you have. But we're looking at something, at least from my estimation, that looks to be deeper than being loyal to your party. It looks to be a fascination. Someone even called it a cult-like following. That here's one man, no matter what he does, he's forgiven. He's called the best president ever. He's the ultimate figure, and people are following him. And some of us have even said it. It seems like a Hitler rising all over again. Maybe that could be too far. I don't know, but it seems like it is definitely deeper than just following a particular party. There is some fascination. How do we explain this cult-like fascination to some people who follow in the way that they do, and who have these beliefs, and no matter what Trump does or says, they are on his side and they are following him? How just speak to us about that, please,
Well,
because
look
we
what
have mental
Lucifer
health
did.
professionals here, and talk to us.
Yeah, well, I was just going to say, Lucifer took a third of the angels. So we're not surprised that people will follow just anyone. If you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything. I'm sure you want a better answer than that. So
no, sometimes
that's
we need to go
my street
bring us right
response.
back to what it really is, and you're right on point there. But I want to hear from the rest of you in terms of your estimations as to what is this fascination. Of course, as a pastor, prophetically and spiritually, I have some things that I like to say, but we're here to hear from you all, as our esteemed colleagues and guests. I mean, here and there.
Hold them down.
Yeah, well, it is a cult of personality. It is. When you think about the presidency and choosing leaders, there are certain things that have nothing to do with them as a person. So the taller of the two usually gets the job. That's totally aesthetic. It has nothing to do with anything, right? The one who is the most charisma, has the most charisma, usually gets the job. And it kind of goes back to Lichtman's categories too. But I think it is a cult. And so one of the problems with having these conversations where we talk about, and I know one of the listeners mentioned it, about seeking to have understanding. Well, if you're going to have understanding in a conversation, there has to be a understood baseline, right? So now I'm understanding this from the perspective of you're in a cult. You're in a cult, and you're not thinking clearly, because this is a religion. This is a following. You are following the Pied Piper here. And so when I understand that people are not clear and they can't see that, so that when the president says that he can shoot somebody in the head and people still will vote for him, that he can't do anything wrong, he can degrade women and be misogynistic and degrade football players, anyone for that matter, African Americans and countries for that matter. It doesn't matter, right? He's a
and call him God's man in the process.
Yeah, exactly. And
Of all
call
these
him and lay your hands on him and stand in the pulpit and utter these proclamations about what he's doing and calling upon angels and all
Angels
kinds.
from Africa. Angels from
Angels
Africa
from
are
Africa,
coming.
no
They
less.
coming. They
Just
coming. South
ridiculous.
America.
And so if we were objective and we looked at this behavior, we would classify it as a cult or cult-like. But since we're talking about somebody's team, we're not able to arrive at that as a baseline. But there's no doubt in my mind that's how they see it. And often they're white people who are poor who, when voting for him and others, they are voting against their interest often. You know? And so there is something to be said about the cult following of these folks, and it is a religion, and we have to call it what it is. And so it's hard to have a conversation if those basic principles can't be understood and accepted.
Yeah, and I'd like to also point to, in addition to that, what Dr. Shanta said earlier about people that she has dealt with that were grieving when Obama became president. Now, I lifted my eyebrows at that. I mean, I could understand it, but didn't experience anything like that. For me, in my world, it was all jubilation. It was the greatest thing that ever happened. I doubted that the black person could be elected president at the time when Barack Obama was winning the primary. I said, this is a setup. You know, this is a setup.
Watch out.
When it happened, and so many white folk voted for Barack Obama than any Democratic president before him. I said, well, America has changed. Now, in keeping with that, there seems to have been a backlash. People sat by with their grief and their pain, and they decided not in America. So when Donald Trump came up and he was just bold, he had the audacity to really hit at all of these racists and bigotry that is embedded in the culture that is often soft-pedaled, and basically it is discreet. He was not going to be politically correct, and there were people that resonated with, because he was fighting their battle. Now it was a comeback from the Obama years, and it just all expressed itself in their primaries and elected a Donald Trump who was much more attractive to them than anybody who was not going to speak it out loud, bold, don't care. And even when what he said was offensive, they said, he really doesn't mean it.
Right.
They want him to mean it, but they don't want it to be held against him.
I want to go back to what I said earlier about it being America unmasked. And for me, I want to pose the question, how often are we intentional, just rhetorical, how often are we intentional about creating a safe space for anyone to be able to express their opinions, right? How grounded are we in what our identities are? What do you, when you describe yourself, what is your identity? I'm a Black female, right, with Caribbean background. I'm a Christian, a Seventh-day Adventist Christian. I am, what are you saying about yourself? And then think about if you, in the identity you have accepted to portray yourself as, are you creating a safe space for the person next to you, who sits in church next to you and worships with you, to be able to express their own views without feeling attacked, right? Without feeling fearful that because the party or the group that they support is not in power or not in charge, are they free to be able to have a conversation with you and know that they are heard the same way I want to be heard? When I think about 300, almost 300 federal judges, lifetime appointments, right? And how that trickles down into our system, into our institutions, for the children that we're serving, for the future ahead of us. Lifetime appointments. And we're not talking about 60 and 70-year-olds getting appointed. We're talking about people who are young, right? It means they're going to live through your lifetime. Are we creating a safe space for us to have those conversations? And are we just being kind to each other? I would say we should start asking those questions.
There's no, can I just jump in? Sorry.
Go ahead, Debbie.
I've been listening and just thinking of how I have felt personally over the last 4 years. This country is very much divided. And it's even more evident with the results, of this election. There's a whole facet of individuals who voted for Trump, who I think they saw him as the voice of their deep-seated fears and hatred and all of those things. I'm not saying that every person who voted for him, is negative or bad or anything like that, but he spoke for those who would talk behind closed doors. He would just come out and has come out and said things. So yes, it would be nice to sit and have these conversations, but what has been modeled for our young children, what has been modeled for our teens, and then for our young adults is that we talk negatively about people. We make fun of, kids with disabilities. We make fun of individuals, or we insult people from other countries who may not be as wealthy as this one or the next one. It's difficult to have a civil conversation with someone who may not be in agreement with you, for the simple fact that what has been modeled for us over the last 4 years has been, we don't respect people who are different from us, who sound different, who look different, who act differently, who look different. It would be great to sit at a table, to have a huge table where all of us can come together and just discuss things. I've been looking at the chat section as well. And yeah, it would be great if we could do that. I know I would love to do that, but there are many who would not be willing to do that just because there's right now so much negativity.
And these conversations are hard, they sometimes you have to be willing to hear very painful things. I've had very close friends. One I can think of in particular, she's like a sister to me, but she has had to sit me down and explain some hard truths, things that I didn't understand many years ago, right? It's not always going to be easy. But to be able to move forward, we have to be willing to confront what is in front of us, right? We can't stick our head in the sand. We can't ignore the elephants in the room. We have to have hard conversations. And if it's not the best time, move on, right? If it's so irritating to me that I don't want to see it on social media, and I find that I'm not going to respond in a respectful way, I don't like conflict, right? So I'm gonna shut it down. I'm going to shut it down. And when I feel like I can respond in a way that is not going to damage my relationship, then we can have that conversation, But I just feel like as I experience this, that the rules are being thrown out of the window, and there are rules that need to be changed. Most definitely.
Let me challenge some of your Christian thinking to everyone here. We have a current president for the last 4 years where character hasn't mattered for those who voted for him. And this time around, he's got over 70 something, I can't remember what it was, 75 million votes or something like that. And it was only by, the grace of God, Biden got 80 million votes to beat Trump out. And he got the most votes of any sitting president ever. He boasts that. You hear him saying that quite often. But let me challenge your Christian thinking. When it comes to the president is not a pastor. He's not some conference leader, some union leader. He's not the GC president. He's just the president of the United States. He's not necessarily a spiritual leader. So because of that, should we change our thinking when it comes to future elections? Should it matter that a person has character or not, has a good character or not? Because for many evangelicals who voted for Trump and supported Trump, his character did not matter. What mattered to them is what he said he was going to do. And you hear them often say, he's doing exactly what he said he was going to do. And all the character issues did not matter to them. They called him a Christian man, a man of God. And for many who support him, it's not so much about his character that they support him, but they support him for the things that he said he's going to do, or simply because he is the Republican nominee, and they support Republican politics. Whereas for many others, such as us, character matters a lot. And a person has to be a good character, of course, because we come with a Christian understanding, and we want our leaders to be individuals of high moral standards. But let me challenge you for a little bit. This is not a spiritual leadership position. Should it matter that this is a person of character, or in the future, should we go for the person or vote for the person or promote the person who says what they're going to do, and we believe they're going to do what they say, and they have the personality and the connections to get it done? Talk to me. We have about just about 10 minutes or so left, but let me challenge your thinking on that.
You're muted, Dr. Thomas.
They'll start again for us. You were muted for a second there, Dr. Noskoy.
Oh, I'm sorry. So ethical behavior, I think, is what we're talking about. And I don't think that there is a religion or morality necessarily prescribed to that. So it's about saying and doing what's right because it's right, right? That's what we talk about ethics. And so I think it is important to lead with that, because so if you tell me that there is a pandemic, I want to believe you. If you tell me that the pandemic is not dangerous, I want to believe you. If you tell me that it's just going to disappear and it's going to be gone by Easter, I want to believe you, right? So integrity does matter, right? And I don't think that, I do think that there are some Christians who do overstep and who expect far more from these public officials than they have the capacity to give, because at the end of the day, they have to do stuff that, they got to cut deals and make bargains and so forth that, might not sit well with us, but nonetheless, they have to do it. So I would say that. And to the conversation about having a conversation, I think the best way we do that is to not start with what we disagree with, right? Because we're actually more alike than we are not. So like we're 99.8% alike, right? So if I'm going to reach an understanding, I have to start with my humanity. So there are things that are germane to us, and let's start there. It's like the person you first meet, you don't like them. But then once you talk to them and get to know them, you like them better. Well, you didn't start at the points of departure. You started at the points of commonality, and you work their way out. And I actually do this in the DEI space that I work in, and we work from the inside out. And it really makes a difference in terms of opening up the communication and understanding. At the end of the day, we are human beings.
I agree with that. And I also like the thought of moving forward. And sometimes at the end of the day, we just have to agree to disagree, and we can still be friends and still be Christians.
Indeed.
Someone asked, Sister Parker says, how are we to align ourselves with our brethren that are not with us? So how do we get along with our church members who maybe don't share the same, I'm assuming here it's political beliefs? Again, it's, we're allowed to have different views, different opinions. I mean, each of us practices our faith differently. We have the continuum of ultra conservative to, very liberal. So it's about mutual respect, having these conversations, meeting people where they are. It's the conflict in conversations, especially at the beginning, that make people's defenses go up. Yeah. So finding that common ground.
Mm-hmm. And I'm sitting here and I'm thinking that the topic of the conversation is exhausted, right? and the energy you're getting from me is exhaustion. I'm tired of fighting. Mm-hmm. I'm tired of the meanness and the degradation, the negativity. Oh my goodness. Let me throw this out there. In 2018, the flu almost took me out. I mean, for 3 months, I was deathly ill. avalanched into complication after complication. That was the flu that we face every single year, right? And I have that memory, and I have grown. Last week, we began to talk about post-traumatic growth, right? I have grown to appreciate life, that I guard my peace selfishly. I guard my peace selfishly. And what that means is, if you want to be angry, please, go, by all means, go ahead. I don't need that anger, that toxic energy, that negativity in my space. And so when I keep saying repeatedly one song, let's talk. Let's have a conversation. Let's try to see, as you said, Dr. Thomas, what's similar in our thinking. Why do you think this? Please, can you help me understand? That's a question I ask very often of people who don't believe what I believe, or people who just seem to be on something that's ridiculous in their ideology. Help me understand how, what you're thinking, or why you think that. And allow people to feel heard. And the bottom line is, be kind.
Yeah. And let me add to that. Well said, Doctor. The challenge remains for us as Christians, who are people that will speak truth and will be called upon to speak truth to power. We must learn how to speak our truth with love. And it sounds easy, but we have to invest a lot of compassion, a lot of care, and a lot of kindness, a lot of respect, and a lot of willingness to hear the other person, see where they're coming from, to speak our truth with love. Perhaps that makes a difference.
Amen. Let's close out on that. Let me just ask you all, what are some other ways that we can show some sensitivity and respect to others who may not share the same views as us, besides having the conversations, engaging them in talk? What are some other ways that we can show sensitivity and respect to them? And we'll close out on this question. We're getting up close to the hour, but take us out on some positive talk. What can we do?
I think maybe one thing you can do is to find something in your community to do where you'll be working with, people from different backgrounds and people who you may not necessarily share a lot of things in common, whether it's running for local city council or whether it's volunteering when you can, at a food bank or something like that. Just get more involved in your community where you can do something for the better good.
Mm-hmm.
And
I would think we can get the youth involved, as our church has, communicating with the seniors, citizens of our church, and connecting and listening, and just being there for people that aren't able to get out, and speaking truth to power. But 9 times out of 10, people just want to tell what they're believing. So we just need to be better listeners.
Listeners,
and not be
indeed.
Judgmental or critical.
Because we all desire a safe space, right? And I keep that in the back of my mind all the time, that I want to feel safe in the space that I'm in. And it's my responsibility, therefore, to offer that to others. That, I don't have to agree with you to care about you.
Correct.
I don't have to to agree with you to be kind to you, or to make you feel loved, because we think we love people. But if that person doesn't feel loved by the way you interact with them, then you haven't loved at all. So it's important to listen and find out from individuals how they desire to feel loved from you or respected from you, and operate in that manner.
Yeah. And I think love is essential. And I can truly love a person without that. I can love a person who loves Trump. I mean, really, it's okay. It's just, their belief system. And I think we can do that. I think what Dr. Debbie said, Dr. Cynthia said, in terms of coming together around our commonalities and around our aligned interests, I think we do that. And then I think we be honest with ourselves. And if we don't have the energy We don't have the time. We don't have the bandwidth for it. Whatever, let it go and do something else. Go somewhere else. Be in another space. And I don't feel like we need to be burdened with this. We've carried a burden for a long time, right? And we don't need to be burdened with helping them figure this out, whether they be Black folks who think like one way or other non-Black folks who think another way. And we don't. So I think we can get into the safe places for ourselves and attend to our own self-care and emotional health and well-being, but also finding ways as far as possible to be loving and to be kind at the same time.
Yeah.
And sometimes love means walking away.
Certainly.
For both of you, right?
Yes. Yes, because I don't want to use no planet-based cussing, and I don't want to get no. I don't want to get nothing out the love compartment.
Amen.
Because we ain't always been saved.
We don't want to go back to those old ways, right? Praise God. I want to thank each and every one of you for joining us for a second time this week to share with us and to help us decompress. And as we stated, just kind of bringing up the topic it brings up tension. But as musicians, they understand this tension and release. Sometimes the best songs, they build tension and then it releases and you feel much better afterwards. So we hope that you listening to us have felt that tension with the topic, but then this conversation and some of the practical ways that we have shared with you to help you has provided that release. And we're going to move forward with some other conversations here in the future. But I want to thank all of our guests, all of our panelists for coming on a second time and sharing with us their wisdom, their expertise, and their training just to help us decompress from all of this election talk. And of course, last week we focused more on COVID-19. God bless you. Normally Pastor McBride, he would sum it all up, but that is a gift that he has that I'm not going to attempt to emulate on tonight. So you just have to bear with me and my gifts and so on and so forth. So praise God. We're going to close out with a word of prayer, and then we will keep you informed as to the next conversation, what the topic will be. But just stay tuned. We hope that you are watching everything that Kansas Avenue does. We're going to be back, of course, on Wednesday evening at 7 p.m. for our Power Hour. We're going to have a good time together in the Lord. Bow your heads with me as we close out with the word of prayer. Father in heaven, thank you, Lord, for blessing us this evening in this conversation and being with those who have come on to help us and to share with us from their own expertise and wisdom, knowledge, and experience. And I pray, Lord, that you would be with every person out there, every individual that has listened to this stream and that will listen to this stream. Politics in America affects us all of us who do live here. And it becomes trying and it builds a lot of tension, and it can even put some rocky parts in some of our relationships. But I pray, Lord, that you would help us and that the things that we have talked about today would indeed help us as well to navigate our relationships and to provide that release from all the tension that these politics and elections have brought up. I pray, Lord, that you would continue to guide this country. We do look forward to the day when you come again and we don't have to worry about any more of these things. Continue to bless us, bless those who have participated today and their families, wherever they are. We thank you now in the name of Jesus